Welcome to African American History Lesson 57. In this video, we will explore redlining and other forms of housing discrimination. What happens when a zip code determines the value of your life, your health, and your future? For generations of African Americans, where one could and could not live was shaped not by choice, but by policy. In the second half of the 20th century, African Americans faced persistent and systemic housing discrimination that limited where they could live, build wealth, and access opportunity. One of the most damaging practices was redlining. This was a federally sanctioned system that denied loans and investment to neighborhoods deemed high risk, typically because they were home to African Americans or other communities of color. These discriminatory practices were enforced by banks, real estate agents, and federal agencies. Their long-term effects rippled through every aspect of Black life. Underfunded schools, limited access to health care, crumbling infrastructure, and a massive racial wealth gap. Even after legal barriers were challenged during the civil rights movement, the legacy of redlining continued to shape patterns of segregation and inequality into the present. This topic explores how housing became both a tool of exclusion and a central battleground in the struggle for racial justice. Throughout the 20th century, African Americans faced systemic barriers to homeownership, one of the most critical means of building generational wealth in the United States. Denied access to fair mortgages, insurance, and property in growing suburban markets, many Black families were forced to rent in overcrowded, segregated urban neighborhoods. This exclusion prevented African Americans from benefiting from the post-war housing boom that helped millions of white Americans accumulate equity and pass down assets. As a result, housing discrimination became a central driver of the racial wealth gap, depriving generations of Black families of the economic security and upward mobility which homeownership often provides. The architecture of modern housing discrimination was constructed not just through individual bias, but through official federal policy. The 1938 Federal Housing Administration Underwriting Manual explicitly instructed lenders to avoid investing in areas where African Americans lived, effectively legalizing residential segregation. These policies, often enforced through racially restrictive covenants and zoning laws, made it illegal or financially impossible for African Americans to live in many suburban communities. In response, civil rights organizations such as the NAACP fought to dismantle these policies, culminating in the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which sought to outlaw housing discrimination, but did not erase its deep systemic legacy. At the heart of housing discrimination was the practice of redlining, named after the red lines drawn on government-backed maps to designate neighborhoods deemed high risk for mortgage lending. These areas were overwhelmingly populated by African Americans and other communities of color. Under the pretense of protecting investment, banks and mortgage lenders systematically denied loans, devalued properties, and starved these neighborhoods of investment. While white families secured low-interest government loans to build homes and accumulate wealth, Black families were locked out of opportunity by design. Redlining reinforced patterns of racial segregation and ensured that Black neighborhoods remained underdeveloped and underserved. This residential security map offers a visual representation of how federal policy codified racial and economic segregation during the mid-20th century. Developed as part of a broader effort to stabilize the housing market during the Great Depression, the HOLC produced color-coded maps that graded neighborhoods based on perceived lending risk. Predominantly Black and immigrant communities were marked in red, designated as hazardous, and deemed unworthy of investment, regardless of the resident's income or creditworthiness. Even when African American families managed to move into well-resourced or predominantly white neighborhoods, they often faced violent backlash. Across the country, from Chicago and Los Angeles to Philadelphia and Detroit, Black homeowners were targeted by angry white mobs and subjected to threats, vandalism, and physical attacks. These acts of racial terror were meant to enforce the boundaries of segregation and intimidate Black families seeking equal access to housing. The violence revealed that housing discrimination was not only about policy, it was also about the defense of white social and economic dominance through fear and intimidation. Lorraine Hansberry's play, A Raisin in the Sun, is a landmark of American theater and a profound exploration of housing discrimination, generational dreams, and the pursuit of dignity within a racially segregated society. The play follows the Younger family, a working-class Black household in Chicago, as they confront the emotional and structural challenges of trying to purchase a home in a white neighborhood. The play reveals the tension between hope and systemic exclusion, as family members debate whether to accept a buyout from a white neighborhood association that seeks to block their move. Hansberry dramatizes not just the legal and economic constraints of redlining and restrictive covenants, but also the psychological toll of racism on ambition, identity, and intergenerational unity. Through characters like Walter Lee Younger and Lena Mama Younger, Hansberry gives voice to the aspirations and frustrations of Black Americans denied access to the American dream. The play's title, drawn from Langston Hughes's poem Harlem, asks whether deferred dreams inevitably dry up like a raisin in the sun, a question deeply rooted in the realities of housing discrimination. Housing discrimination was not merely a reflection of individual prejudice. It was a deliberate and institutionalized system that shaped the physical and economic landscape of the United States. Through redlining, restrictive covenants, and state-sanctioned segregation, African Americans were systematically excluded from homeownership, wealth accumulation, and access to high-quality education and health care. These policies not only deepened racial inequality in the 20th century, but continue to influence disparities in the present day. The struggle against housing injustice, from the courtroom to the state, in works like A Raisin in the Sun, revealed how central the fight for space, security, and dignity was, and remains, to the broader Black freedom movement. Understanding this history is essential to understanding the structures of inequality that civil rights activists sought to dismantle and the enduring power of community resistance. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also, please follow us on the social media platforms listed on the screen.